Vecna, Vecna, Vecna. You either love him, hate him, or you're indifferent to him. In which case, I need you to either love or hate him to fit my narrative. The Lich has been out for just over a year, and in that time, he has had a massive glow up. Levi Ackerman has ascended to the top of the kill rates on Nightlight, which, yes, is a smaller sample size, but still a decent chunk of people. Not only that, but on the most recent kill rates Behavior showed us, he was very high up on that list too. Point being, Cole Cassidy has always performed well in terms of kill rates, but so has Pig. So, clearly kill rates are far from the only factors to determine whether or not someone needs to either be nerfed or buffed. I'm not sure what it was that caused Behavior to decide the Lich needed buffing not once, but twice, but here we are, celebrating the 1-year birthday with a second helping of buffs, like a big cake. A big purple birthday cake, because he's purple. Yeah, truth be told, I've always had a lot of time for Vecna. Yeah, I already gave up on the Matt Mercer voice acting bit. Well, he was never super good. There's just something about having 4 powers with unique use cases that speaks to me in a way a lot of killers just never have. Let's take a look at what is probably the most direct comparison to Baldy, the Dark Lord, Count Dracula. Dracula has 3 powers: Worse Spirit, Better Wesker, and Worse Pyramid Head. The thing that makes Dracula so strong is that he never has to suffer through having to just stand there and kind of deal with the shenanigans the survivors are trying to do. Looping around a short loop? Hellfire cooks them. Taller loop where they can't see you? Throw yourself at them as a big dog. Need to get across the map or close the gap on a survivor? Become bats. Vect, on the other hand, just sometimes has to deal with it, which kinda sucks. The real purple guy was immediately power crept substantially within just a few months after his release, but Vecna did get a pretty cunty dress. Dracula didn't get one of those, so who's the real winner? Dracula. The winner is Dracula. Despite that, the distance between Vecna and cooler Vecna has been closed up quite a lot in these recent patches. All 4 of his powers, Fly, Fly to the Dam, Dispelling Sphere, and Mage Hand, have all received some major changes since his release. Instead of covering every change, I'm just going to go from patch 9.0.0 and explain these changes in a more comprehensive way before we move on to hear the opinion of a certified Vecna expert. I have to work on that one a bit. After that, we'll wrap this up so we can just go ahead and go home. Patch 9.0.0 released on June 17th, 2025 with Springtrap. This patch also saw buffs to survivor healing perks like Botany Knowledge and Desperate Measures. These were the biggest talking points of the patch, but at the same time, the Lich received a large glow up to his kit, meaning every single spell was given a change to bring it into a stronger spot. Before I get into the unique spells, I want to take a glance at an additional change he was given in this patch. At the beginning of the trial, Vecna's spells will no longer be given a 15-second cooldown. This may not sound like a lot, but this would allow for Vecna to get early tracking with the Sphere and instant mobility with the Fly, putting them both on cooldown early, causing them to be off cooldown earlier in your next chase. This was a pretty major buff to these 2 spells, which was paired with additional buffs to make them even better. I'm now going to move into the individual spell buffs that we received. Let's see if you can spot a trend going forward. The Dispelling Sphere went from a 35-second cooldown to a 30-second cooldown. The travel time was also nearly doubled, from 5.5 meters a second to now being 9.75 meters a second. There was also a buff to the Killer Instinct, going from 3 seconds to now 5 seconds long, to give Vecna a lengthy scan paired with his new girthy ball. The Sphere was best used to disable the magic items that survivors could use to now being a genuinely good tracking tool to give Vecna more on-demand Call of Duty UAV action. Speaking of magic items, this patch also saw buffs to survivors' magic items, the most important one being the new and improved Interlopers, which will now give survivors 7% haste when Vecna holds up a pallet with Mage Hand. The Dispelling Spear is now a necessary counter to the strength of these magic items. Moving on though, Fly to the Dam went from a 35-second cooldown to also now being 30 seconds. This is one of the higher skill ceiling abilities that Vecna has, giving him an ability to down a survivor from a bit of a distance. However, once you get some decent knowledge, you can also drop them directly on top of survivors to instantly injure them. I don't really like this ability very much, because I think FOTD on top of someone is just a bit corny if I'm being completely honest. But it's undeniably a skill-based play from the Vecna that most players don't understand how to even do. The issue I have is that it exponentially affects new survivors, or unprepared survivors, in comparison to the better players who can predict it, or just call it out when Vecna is going to use his funky little goons. Not like that kind of goon, like the Batman kind of goon. Being able to drop your little guys at a different elevation to get a hit is something I can appreciate because it adds a new skill ceiling to Vecna that affects survivors of all levels equally. John Comp with 10k hours is probably going to be hit just as often as Ashley Applesauce, who downloaded the game 2 hours ago. Granted, this could seem a little bit hypocritical to like one almost guaranteed hit and not the other, but yeah, fair enough. I guess that's fair. Moving on, the Mage Hand also received a buff, going from a 40-second cooldown to now just being 35 seconds long. Mage Hand has had its cooldown shot up and down, back and forth since his release, at one time being incredibly frustrating to play against, to now being outmatched by every other spell in my opinion. Not that Mage Hand is bad, but I do think it is currently outperformed by every other spell in Vecna's arsenal, due to being a bit inconsistent at times, as well as the Dead by Daylight classic, super buggy. I feel like Mage Hand is going to be Vecna's slice and dice, the numbers of it being changed every few patches depending on if behavior feels like it's overperforming or not. He's only been out a year, and the ability has had 3 direct changes. Patch 8.0.2 saw a nerf to the pallet raising time. Patch 8.4.0 saw a nerf to the cooldown, bringing it up to 40 seconds. And then in this patch, we saw a revert to that nerf. Mage Hand has been ping-ponged quite a bit already. However, it would be a mistake to not mention, much like I did earlier, that the Interloper's boots or gauntlets will provide 7% haste for 3 seconds and show you the aura of any raised pallets. This buff has harshly affected the strength of this part of Vecna's power, adding to my theory of Mage Hand potentially being buffed in the future by a nerf to the Interloper items. Despite the strength of these specific magic items, without it, the Mage Hand can often lead to a hit. If a survivor does have them though, the likelihood of a hit is severely lessened, especially without the use of an add-on to buff your Mage Hand further. The final part of his overall power is the Fly, which has had the most discussion around it recently. Fly went from a 25-second cooldown to now being 20 seconds long. Not only was the cooldown buffed, but he will also fly for an additional second, going from 4 seconds to 5. Granted, this was also paired with a nerf, adding an additional quarter of a second to the post-fly cooldown, bringing it to nearly 3 seconds instead of a flat 2.5 seconds. Fly is now, in my opinion, Vecna's best spell by far. The very short cooldown, paired with the amount of distance he can cover, has given Vecna one of, if not the most important thing that a killer in Dead by Daylight can have: mobility. The strongest killers in the game, except for Nurse, have mobility as an extremely large part of their kit. Blight has his Rush, Billy has his Saw, Dracula has the Bat form, Spirit has her Phase, so on and so forth. While he is nowhere near as strong as these killers, he does have a weaker form of something that is incredibly powerful, making it very powerful. Yeah, that's the tier. You got incredibly powerful, and below that is very powerful. Point is, Vecna's Fly went from a catch-up tool to now being not only good at catch-up, but also a very effective tool for getting across the map. So, let's look at these buffs as a collective. Did you notice anything? Literally everything received seemingly a small buff to the cooldown. Mage Hand, Flight of the Damned, Dispelling Sphere, and the big boy Fly. These are the strongest states of each spell, but personally, I find the buffs a bit disappointing. Let me explain. Vecna has so much to his kit now. Granted, these 4 spells are the most important bit to his kit and should be the primary focus. But personally speaking, I would have rather seen the spells given more of a quality over quantity type of buff to them. The spells have a bit of a lengthy cooldown, however the spells are much more effective. This would have prevented Vecna from spell spamming like he can kind of do right now. You could have also given nerfs to the magic items and left the spell cooldowns as they were, but the ultimate argument against this, being able to use a spell every 30 seconds on a rotation, meaning you'll almost certainly have a spell at all times, has made Vecna feel very good. So quite frankly, it doesn't really matter if I wanted some more big-brained buffs that made you have to think more about using your spells. Vecna currently just feels better than he ever has before, which I can't argue with. Arguably, game feel is more important than literally anything else, more important than strength, aesthetics, so on and so forth. I wanted to get some help with this, because while I play Vecna a decent amount, I would never classify myself as a Vecna expert. What can I call that? A Vexpert. No, I need to workshop that one a bit more. Anyways, I spoke to my friend, ARSHIE Bob, who is in the top 10 Vecna players in the world. Thankfully, he's also a bit of a major yapper. This is what he had to say about Vecna's most recent changes.
Hello, I'm ARSHIE Bob. I play Lich a bit too much, and I'm going to be talking about the Vecna changes that came with patch 9.0.0 on the Springtrap update. Now, as a true Springtrap FNAF fan, I was less excited for the FNAF chapter and more excited when I scrolled down and I saw the Lich. So let's go over these changes, hopefully a bit quickly, because I don't have much time and my power is being limited. So first of all, having your cooldowns available at the start of the trial is amazing. I don't know why Vecna had 15 seconds of cooldown when Kaneki is like zooming halfway across the map day 1. Blight is doing the same thing. Why did Vecna not have his cooldown? I don't know. but this is an amazing change. It lets you not only Dispelling Sphere to find survivors, but also like fly to them. And now that, spoilers for later, now that fly is super buffed, it's even better. And decreasing all the cooldowns by 5 is definitely interesting. I don't know if this is the way I would buff his spells. I would much rather them make the spells more viable and more worth their cooldown rather than lowering the cooldown. And for fly, I heavily disagree due to changes we will see later. But overall, lowering the cooldowns over and over again, not my favorite thing. It kind of takes away from his spell cycling playstyle or mentality, and also just like rewards you less or punishes you less for missing, which I guess lowering his skill floor and ceiling is a good thing. But I don't know. I would rather them make the spells like worth their long cooldowns in the first place. And next up, the changes to the Dispelling Sphere, which I really do like. Removes the interaction time, locking the killer's camera. This is when you cast the Dispelling Sphere and you're locked looking forward. This is actually bugged. Instead of the interaction time for looking around, it's just the interaction time. So if you cast the Dispelling Sphere, you can instantly do like anything else. This is really funny because you can Dispelling Sphere and then cast another spell and have that second spell be like the animation be canceled. Also, you can cast Dispelling Sphere and then pick up immediately, which I think is funny. But I really like this. And then Dispelling Sphere moves faster the closer it moves faster when you first cast it, and then it slowly slows down. This is amazing because it incentivizes short range Dispelling Spheres, which is how you're supposed to be using it anyways. You're using it to cover the distance in front of you when you're casting Dispelling Sphere, less to snipe generators, because sniping generators is very inconsistent, because if they have the Dispelling Sphere item, then they can completely ignore your Dispelling Sphere, or they can completely dodge your Dispelling Sphere, and you're given false info. It's like when you pain res a generator and you don't hear a scream. That's not exactly reliable info, because someone could have gotten off the generator. That's the mentality with sniping with Dispelling Sphere. But if you use it close to you, you scan the area, and the survivor doesn't have time now to move out of the way. So you get to dispel them, you get to scan them, and with this change, increasing the Killer Instinct duration, you can track them behind walls. You're not going to get lost when they run behind a wall. It's just amazing, honestly, and it increases the skill ceiling for Dispelling Sphere even more. And it wasn't even that high to begin with, in my opinion. But all right, now for the fly changes. These are possibly the most controversial changes, both to Vecna mains and to survivors. Increase the end interaction time of fly by a quarter of a second. Increase the duration of fly, and fix the bug which prevented the Lich from reaching the intended movement speed when casting fly. Apparently, Vecna has not been moving at his intended speed this entire time, and nobody has noticed. Apparently we're supposed to be moving at Mach 10, because it really does feel like you're moving so much faster, and with the duration, you go so far with fly. You genuinely have so much map pressure and so much like catch-up potential, and this is the part people are annoyed with. And the part that Vecna players are annoyed with is increasing the end interaction time of fly by a quarter of a second. This makes it more clunky to M1 after fly. It heavily reduces the feeling of Vecna, and also incentivizes to not use fly in chase, but rather outside of chase, which personally, as someone who loved using fly in chase, it's a bit disheartening. But now it's more able to be used to not only catch up. Like, this is undoubtedly a buff. I just don't like it 100%. I would rather them I would rather them bump up the cooldown to 25 or even 30 seconds and revert the end interaction time, because as of now, fly is genuinely a really good spell, maybe even too good. I don't know why they decided to buff the cooldown and then buff the spell immediately afterwards. I think the speed, the duration was fine. Honestly, they didn't even need to do the duration. I think the duration was okay. But yeah, a lot of people complaining that fly is too fast, that distance against Vecna doesn't matter. I do agree to an extent, and I think a lot of that is because it just doesn't feel like he ever has fly down. Like, when I was playing it for the first time, my first thought is genuinely like, holy shit, I never not have fly. If you make a mistake, you can just fly back up to the survivor. Sure, it gets countered a lot easier in chase, but you're able to body block survivors a lot more since you're even faster, and you're gonna have to body block survivors. It's like you're playing a budget Kaneki sometimes, and it's not 100% consistent, and it only really works if there's like a corridor, like if you're at shack and you can block off the doorway. But yeah, overall not my favorite change, but I love the fly speed. This one is I don't mind making things more consistent. It kind of streamlines the gameplay for pallet dropping, because you can't just raw lift a pallet now if the survivor is close to it, because they will be able to drop the pallet on your head. You have to lift it either when they're in the dropping animation or when they're not close to the pallet, so you can body block. I mean, I would rather this not be the counterplay to Mage Hand, but like, I mean, I guess what are we gonna do? These changes are nothing burger. I would rather they have buffed the other items so that they're worth getting, instead of just buffing the interloper again, which was already his or the strongest magic item. Aura reveal, not that big of a deal. Now the add-on changes are where we get some controversiality. So they nerfed Trickster's Glove and they nerfed Potion of Speed. I know why they did that. Or no, Trickster's Glove and Boots of Speed. I know why they did this, because these add-ons incentivize casting Mage Hand and just running the survivor down. I don't personally agree with this. I don't think these add-ons needed nerfs. Maybe Boots of Speed, but Trickster's Glove was far from a top-tier add-on. It was more of a feel-good add-on, and I don't even think the extra 0. Or the loss of 0.2 seconds even like hurts it that much. It just seems like a nothing burger change. Crystal Ball, they made partially base kit, so it makes sense why they're nerfing it. Would rather they change the effect, because 1 second is literally nothing. Crystal Ball was at least mid-tier before, and now it's never worth running. Potion of Speed was nerfed along with the attack cooldown. So I don't like this change, because it just makes fly feel very clunky when you cancel it. I would have rather they had it so that this new Potion of Speed restored the value of old non-Potion of Speed. I would have really liked to see that, but this add-on is like not even worth running now. Rings of Telekinesis, this is not the buff that it needed. Nobody was taking this because, oh, the duration is too short. No, the add-on is just ass. The add-on is just ass. The amount of situations where you're mage handing a pallet, upright pallet, by the way, it doesn't do anything if you cast it on a down pallet. Nobody is vaulting a window after casting a mage hand. The only loops where that might ever be relevant is shack, but if you're mage handing shack pallet, you're probably getting the hit anyways, and jungle gyms. But also, you're not vaulting the window, and why would you? Because it's 10 seconds. Especially when Vecna has such synergy with Bamboozle, I don't see why you would ever run this add-on. I mean, sure, it's not like his add-ons are like the greatest in the first place, but this is like genuinely a waste of an add-on slot. Ring of Spell Storing going down a second. This is a unfortunate byproduct of them reducing spell cooldowns, is that and you'll see later, Pearl of Power was also nerfed to 2 seconds. This is an unfortunate side effect where they have to nerf the cooldown add-ons, otherwise they become too impressive. I would rather Ring of Spell Storing be changed at this point. I think Pearl of Power is fine, because 2 seconds... Okay, here's a concept called spell waiting that I just made up on the spot. So, at least with old Ring of Spell Storing, where it's 2 seconds, if you need your spell and it's on cooldown, waiting 2 seconds is a long time. Waiting 1 second, not really. It's how much is the urgency that you need the spell that 1 second is going to make a difference between 2 seconds. That's what I'm thinking of. And that situation like almost never comes up because it's 1 second. The margin of error is so small. You'd much rather run a more consistent add-on that actually does something in more situations. It's not like the worst add-on, but it's certainly not like the best anymore. And I think it's not exactly worth running. Cloak of Elvenkind is really interesting because before it was completely useless, but now it's actually kind of good. Lowers your tear radius, so it's 10 meters during fly, assuming you're not running any tear radius increasing or decreasing add-ons. This is actually quite good. It does confuse survivors on time to time, and even though Vecna screams his whole like family history whenever he casts fly, it's still useful because, you know, survivors are the most attentive, and the more distance you get and the less people have to react to fly. I mean, you can see this with Kaneki. Like, he just jumps on you within like a second. Sure, Vecna doesn't jump on you within a second, but he's going to be quiet as hell while he does it. And I think it's really good. Staff of Withering. I don't know why this add-on was ever buffed. This was like top 5 add-ons already. Increased Exhaustion. This doesn't really do anything because you're mostly using it in chase, and like the person you're dispelling is likely the person you're chasing anyways. So it's kind of a nothing burger change, but also why did we buff like one of the strongest add-ons? I don't know. Robe of Eyes already getting buffed to an additional second. Keep in mind, this add-on is indirectly buffed by the lowered cooldowns because you're going to have it up more often. And also, since Fly and Dispelling Sphere is faster, you're able to scan people and capitalize on the information a lot easier. Not to mention, it's sort of a budget lethal now if they spawn next to the chests. This is one of his best add-ons now. I was already a Robe of Eyes believer before the buffs, but it's genuinely insane now. You have it up legit all the time. If you cycle it correctly, you can have it like you can have Robe of Eyes active for like 60% of the game, and that's absolutely insane. And not to mention, sometimes it just shows you a random aura, and sometimes a random aura is all you need to in the neutral. It's just genuinely such a good add-on. Aura reading is awesome. If a chest is in a loop as well, then you just get perma wall hacks through the wall. And also, if you combine it with Bag of Holding, you can see when people are taking your shit from chests, and you can fly to them, and they're gonna be oblivious, so they're not gonna hear you coming. It's genuinely amazing. I love it. Dragon Tooth Dagger, just a 15 seconds. Hemorrhage and Mangled increase. I don't know what to think about this. I don't run this add-on. I think it's better now. I think 45 seconds was a laughable effect. 60 seconds is more of like instead of laughing at the nerd in high school, you're kind of like, you know, getting to know him, you know, hearing about his backstory. He's still a nerd. I mean, I'm a nerd, so I'm not saying this like it's a bad thing, but it's like the perspective, right? Like, now you're, like, becoming friends with a nerd. You're, like, shaking hands. You understand his backstory. That's what this is like. I mean, it's 15 seconds. Hidden running will be better. It's a buff. I would have rather seen it at, like, 70 seconds, maybe. But that might be too much, considering the fact that this is basically sloppy for survivors who have same proc conditions with a magic item. I don't know. It's fine. And now this one is... I like the buff for this. 10 extra seconds on undetectable when all of your spells are on cooldown. I don't like this add-on in the first place because I never proc it in my day-to-day gameplay because I usually have a spell on cooldown and I don't like wasting spells for undetectable. But several people have found success with this add-on. And while it does no longer proc at the beginning of the trial because of the spell cooldowns now being immediate, it's now a lot longer and you can actually capitalize off the undetectable a lot easier. I think 10 seconds was a bit too short before, so seeing it at 20 seconds, even though they did remove the beginning of the game effect, I think that's a really good change because it not only incentivizes... Keep in mind, it's a lot... cooldown changes are interesting because they reduce the cooldowns and you might think, oh, that might make it harder to proc because you're gonna have your spells on cooldown more, so you're not gonna have them all on cooldown. That's kind of true, but also you have to consider that it's a lot more worth it to quote-unquote waste spells now because they come back up a lot sooner. You're not being punished as hard. So this add-on, going for it intentionally, is better. Going for it accidentally, like I purposefully do, is worse. So it depends. If you're playing specifically around Cloak of Invisibility, it's definitely a buff. I mean, this change is a buff. I'm talking about the cooldowns. But if you just run it for the love of the game, it's probably a nerf. But it depends on your playstyle, and that's the cool thing about Lich. There's so many different playstyles you can invoke, and so many different... every Vecna main thinks about his add-ons differently, his playstyles, his cooldowns. It's incredible to see. Anyways, that's been ARSHIE Bob. That's been my thoughts and opinions on the patch, and I will turn it back over to Kosir, the goats. I eat hamburgers.
If you want to see more from ARSHIE, all of their socials are linked in the description. So let's finally answer the question, is Vecna, big quotes here, broken? Well, much like most things in Dead by Daylight, the answer is a lot more complicated than it might appear on the surface. This message was sent in my Twitch chat a few days ago, twitch.tv/Kasir. There is a difference between overpowered and broken. Overpowered is something that is performing better than it should. Broken is something that is just inherently badly designed. I don't really think any part of Vecna is currently broken. It would probably take a pretty big mistake for behavior to lead to this killer being anywhere near broken. The example in the message is Legion. Legion is nowhere near overpowered, but the design of the character is just inherently broken. The entire power is getting a hit, maybe a down if the survivors make a mistake. Nothing wrong with liking Legion, by the way. It's genuinely one of my favorite characters to play off stream. Other things that I personally would consider broken was Manual Scamper Chucky, Insta ADS Deathslinger, and Kaneki's Enraged Vaults. None of these characters were stronger than Nurse, Blight, or Billy, but they did need to receive some changes. All of them have, except Kaneki, who instead was nerfed in other ways to bring him back in line with the other characters. However, I do think that one aspect of Vecna is currently overpowered, that being the fly. The incredibly fast cooldown paired with the extra duration has made the fly exponentially stronger than it has in the past. Now, I don't think the fly is extremely overtuned. You could revert one of the two major buffs it received to bring it back in line. Either reduce the duration back to 4 seconds, or increase the cooldown back to 25 seconds, and that would theoretically be a nice middle ground, making it stronger than it was pre-patch 9.0.0 without making it as impressive as it feels right now. However, since its behavior, and I know how behavior likes to change things, the likelihood of Vecna just getting one change is very small. He'd more than likely need a set of changes all at once. So here I come with my big DbD brain to make some other small changes to pair with this. There's not really that many. I would just suggest nerf Interlopers and overhaul his add-ons because they aren't the most interesting right now. It's a relatively small set of changes, but it's all he really needs. A nerf to the fly paired with a buff to Mage Hand could be a good trade-off for the character, and actually would probably end up being more of a net buff than a net nerf. Vecna for me is in that Demogorgon range of being nearly perfect, with only a few flaws that behavior has just slightly been missing. Continuing to buff his cooldowns over and over while making him feel better has the potential of making him feel extremely spammy to play against, which is not what I personally value in the character. However, at the end of the day, this is just the opinion of one person who plays the character relatively often, but nowhere near the absolute highest level. I'm interested in hearing what you all think. Has Vecna been overbuffed or no? Like I said earlier, I think other than Fly and his add-ons, he's nearly perfect. Really quickly, before I properly get to the outro here, I just want to apologize for how slow my uploads have been. I've increased my streaming hours quite a bit, making the amount of time I have to work on these videos minimal if I'm being honest. I'm going to try and do better to balance the time I spend on streaming and working on videos. Very sorry for how long this video and the last video took. Anyways, if you liked the video, you can leave a like. If you really liked it, you can subscribe to catch the next one. The link to my Discord and Twitch channel are both in the description. My name is Kasir, and I am signing off. Goodbye, everyone.